All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to Touchstone's Artist Happy Hour series. Before we get started, I would like to remind everyone to please keep your microphones muted so we can avoid any background noise. I also want to mention that Touchstone will be hosting a free virtual open house event on Saturday, September 26th. So check out our website, touchstonecrafts.org, for more information about that. Tonight, our guest speaker is Gerald Brown. She's a ceramic artist originally from the Chicago area, but is currently living in Philly. I first met Gerald at Syracuse University, where we both completed our undergrad in ceramics. Since graduating, Gerald has become involved in a number of ceramics organizations, including the Clay Studio in Philly, Vox Populi Gallery. She's also on the board of directors at Watershed Center for the Ceramic Arts. She is the co-founder of Clay Siblings, and most recently, she accepted a position with NCECA. Tonight, Gerald will be speaking about her ceramic work as a social activist, as well as her involvement within and beyond her community. I just want to remind everyone to keep your microphones muted. If you have any questions, please write them in the comments, and we'll share them with Gerald during the Q&A session at the end. I will now hand it over to Gerald. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I think that this is an awesome platform that Touchstone has created for artists to still get together, learn from each other, and just kind of have a good time in the process. So I'm really excited. I'm going to share my screen. Does everything look good, everybody? All right. So what I want to do today is just kind of briefly touch on some of the opportunities I've had to work within kind of the ceramic world, different roles, different leadership positions I've held, and then also just share a little bit about my artistic practice. Please feel free, like in the chat, like Stacy said, if you have any questions about anything to clarify, I'll be happy to explain in great detail later on today. So yeah. So a lot of my, well, I'll start back here. A lot of my ceramic leadership skills started kind of at an early age when I didn't really understand art's impact on my life. I didn't have a ton of experience with going to, summer way camps or like learning art in different ways, but somehow I always managed to keep myself busy, whether it was drawing or like, making little tape sets for my toys and things like that. But then in when I went to high school, there was an art center right across the street from my school. And we had like a pretty robust kind of program, nothing too extenuating, but something really nice that really captured my eye and helped, inspire me to think about what does it mean to give students access to quality materials and resources. And one of the things that I loved at the art center that I worked at, the Hyde Park Art Center, was that they kind of brought together students who had different majors, different practices, different backgrounds together and allowed them to use art as a material to impact their community. And that's when it started to really got my gears turning about what is possible for art and how can this be, a vessel that can really excite a community and bring about more immediate changes. So one of the leadership positions where this comes out at is like my Clay Siblings project that I founded with my brother, Mike Tavares, who's also a Syracuse alum. He and I really loved going to NCECA. We've been to maybe like 1 or 2 NCECAs prior to the project's inception. And we loved how there would be like over 6,000 people coming together in this one city's location and how we would share, ideas, techniques, skills, or even party together. But one thing that kind of struck us is that all these people come to this city, but like what kind of engagement is with the locals and how can they benefit from this large opportunity of NCECA coming to their city? And so what we decided to do was kind of start this project that partnered with local high schools in the area. At the time of the inception, we partnered with high schools that had their own ceramic program, but we ultimately started to expand it with any high school that wanted us to be there, we would make a way to be there, whether they had clay or not. So we would reach out to the teachers, like, we want to do this. We want to teach students how to throw. We want to teach different skills that are integral to our practice. They were like, we don't have clay. So then we would be like, oh, we have donation clay. And then they're like, well, we don't have wheels. We have donated wheels. Well, we don't have tools. We have tools and glazes donated. And so it became this opportunity of anything that they would say no, we would try to figure out a way to get around it, because we felt like everybody deserved to have this opportunity. And my brother and I just fell in love with this project. The first time we did it was in Portland in 2017. The second time we did it was in Pittsburgh, which is actually these two pictures are from. And we got a chance to really build some deep connections. This teacher, one of the funniest stories about the project is this teacher had this back room with all this junk, all this stuff everywhere. And he had never really worked with it. He never really cleaned it out or used that area. It just kind of was storage. And when he found out that we wanted to work with him, he was like, oh, I think I have some wheels in the back or something like that. And he took upon like a couple Saturdays, like, to just go back and clear all that clutter out. And when we got there, we were seeing this back area for the first time, but the kids were seeing it for the first time. They were seeing these machines for the first time. And it was a really cool opportunity to kind of insert new life into this high school. So one of the biggest components, so how it kind of, actually, let me back up. How it kind of works is we enter the city on the Saturday before the conference. We usually have a host sibling who's from that area that we know, who like is either like we've met in a past, engagement or something of that sort, like Saul Besner, actually, who's in the bottom right corner, who's a Touchstone affiliate. He was our host sibling for Pittsburgh, but we stayed with them. They get us acclimated, show us around. We get, some necessary materials to help get us started. Then Sunday, we have an Airbnb already reserved for all the siblings to come together and stay the night and just kind of get prepared for the workshops. We recruit BFA students and post-bac students from different universities that are in the area to give them an opportunity to learn some skills about teaching and, transferring some of these skill sets that they learn in kind of like an academic vacuum, and providing the opportunity to just get back to the basics, to teaching people like why clay is fun, why is it important, how do you pull up walls, what does it mean to pinch a pot, just like those very basic key elements that we have mastered and loved, and giving that back to a community. So we meet on Sunday, we get together, then the Monday and Tuesday we do workshops. And what we added as a second component after a couple, the second visit we did, we started going to bring the students to NCECA. So when we first did, we would talk about, there's this big conference that's in this area. And, we figured that it's easier to convince students that clay, the power of it and the impact it can have when there's like 5,000 people in their city. But we wanted to take it a step further, because we would tell them how amazing the conference is. They can't probably have a way to get there. And if they do, it's like going to be out of their, normal routine. So we wanted to make these easier, and we partnered with NCECA to get donated passes for the students to come. So for the past 2 years now, we have brought students from the conference area from the workshops to the actual conference area. So here's a few pictures. The top right is a group of siblings from 2018 and them in their workshops. Here on the right are actually students at the conference center. Kids would just get so excited to see the resource hall. I remember vividly kids running up and be like, yo, is that a kiln? And being so excited by just like things that I feel like, they don't normally come in contact with, or that sometimes we even take for granted, that we're just walking around all this amazing stuff that's in the area. On the left is actually Mike with a portion of the 800 pounds of clay that we got donated from Continental Clay. And each year we're finding that we're making new connections with other leaders in the field who want to pull all these resources together to help make this project better. My brother and I, we started, to quote like a musician that I love, J. Cole, $1 in a dream. We really started with just an idea of what we felt we wanted to do with students, to do with people that looked like us, to tell them that this is a material that changed our lives. And we came from, you know, similar cultural limitations or back of parents like not seeing that art could be a possible career venture, or that there's that this is a luxury to do, and it is actually really a sustainable and amazing career path. So we have a ball with the students, and in return, it just helps us kind of stay committed to the things that we love the most about the project, which is like, how can we be vessels for the community, and constantly ask the question, like, what are we doing for clay? So you might be wondering why I put this math equation on this PowerPoint. I actually really love math, and you'll see later, and when I start talking about my artistic practice, how equations and diagrams are a big part of my process. But this actually has to do with clay siblings. So we figured out, we started to talk about, Mike and I, dissecting the different components of the clay sibling project, and really trying to boil down why each component is necessary, and to succinctly communicate that to other people about what the project can do. So the first part, the X, is about introducing a new skill within the natural environment. So that's like us doing the workshops, us coming in, transforming the students' natural environment, things that they see all the time, and like wanting to change how they look at things. You know, sometimes they just like, well, this just is boring old room with these boring old walls. How can we tap into that space and make them have a new perspective of what's around them? And a lot of times, just like what I talked about with that teacher in the back room, this becomes an opportunity to introduce new energy to the teacher as well, as an opportunity to see what is possible. So we tackled this idea with like coming in with donation clay, coming in with wheels, slips, glazes. One time we started working with 2 schools that didn't have any clay at all, any glaze, any nothing. And students who were at University of Wisconsin River Falls and St. Olaf, that they would literally drive back after they left the workshop on Monday, drive back to their school, like make up, you know, plaster slabs or different tools that were necessities to the studio itself. And so like being able to really transform that environment to make it feasible for the students and the teacher. The second component, why, is about accessibility to art as a career. So thinking about the larger art world and what is possible, and your exposure to if you can be a part of that space. And so a lot of times it looks like, you know, going to museums or going to gallery exhibitions, but the way we tackle it is going to NCECA. So being able to, in X, be inside the environment, transform the way that the students look at their environment, coming to them, then being like, hey, you're bigger than this environment, like come visit NCECA. So taking them out of that environment, being in this external larger art world, so then they can see themselves being a part of this space. Because sometimes when you're just like reading about it in a book to some degree, it's just like there's like some dissonance between like, can you actually really achieve that? Is that possible? Is that for you? And so being able to bring them out of that space, seeing other artists. When we were in Pittsburgh, we took them to the Contemporary Craft Show, where Winnie Owens Hart curated an exhibition, and seeing the kids light up by like work by like Roberta Lugar or Kyle and Kelly Phelps. Seeing artists that look like them, who make work about them, make work like the way the students were thinking, and then also seeing a price tag. Like, I mean, students are blown away, like, I could sell a pot for that much? Like, I think that was probably also a thing I took for granted too. Like, you know, sometimes being stuck in this world, I understand more about clay as a field, but sometimes people think that there's not like an actual job to this, you know, and just being able to connect those dots and really show opportunities. The second part, the last part is we wanted to also think about how these 2 components often can run into a dead end, right? So like when we ended up finishing a workshop, we'll be like, okay, we did this awesome thing. We showed them how to throw. We took them to NCECA, but there's still a lot of other barriers in the way that can prevent students from continuously thinking about their own growth and having access to opportunities. So we were like, how can we think about this being an ongoing process? And so that's what Z kind of taps into, is resources that keep the opportunities for growth and overcoming barriers infinite. So like when we think about students getting an internship or getting a scholarship to a college or doing a workshop at a craft school, those are things that are constantly challenging what their views are about the current environment and their ability to be a part of this larger art world space in a way that constantly knocks down those barriers. And so the idea is, if you constantly are implementing these kind of resources, the opportunities for X and Y will become infinite, you know? And so like, what would it look like for us to, like, if we left, you know, more clay than what we needed for the workshop? So like, instead of getting 800 pounds of clay, what if we doubled it and had 16? And so, I mean, not 16, but 160. And so then kids could work with clay more often than what their school budget allowed them. Or like, what if we got a workshop with a nearby artist who came there to show them new demonstrations? Like, it constantly attacks more barriers than what we initially be like, oh, well, we did this cool thing and that's the end of it. I think that, you know, as we think critically about gaps and spaces of accessibility, Z becomes almost just as critical as X and Y. So this is just like a mini scope of how we frame the Clay Settlement Project module and different things that are really important to us. So another aspect in my art administration career that I've gotten a chance to tap into is curating. One of my favorite, well, three of my favorite artists, Dante K. Hayes, Salvador Jimenez Flores, and Jennifer Lane Datchuk, I invited them to be a part of this exhibition called Funkadelic Awakening, a Futuristic Resistance. It was an exhibition curated at the Clay Studio in June 2019. And what I loved about these artists alone was just like the exploration of materiality and like their ability to really think critically about concepts. And so I really want to pull together a group of artists that not only had this kind of complexity in their practice, but also just like how they challenge Eurocentric dominance across the board, and like taking those refined details and implement it in the physicality of the visual objects. And so for me, what was really important was like how this idea of challenging this larger mainstream dominance in a way that re-envisions what is possible for yourself and your community beyond your current reality. And so that tapped into a lot of ideas that I had previously explored with the idea of Afrofuturism. Futurism in general talks about, you know, using, you know, advancement in technology like flying cars or the internet to imagine what is possible beyond what we can see. But Afrofuturism as a theoretical landscape allows us to really imagine a group of people in whatever variation of bondage or abuse, to imagine a reality beyond what is currently constructed for them. And I loved how each artist kind of tackled those issues. One thing that I really love about Afrofuturism also that, you know, allows me to think in this theoretical lens or see this work in this theoretical lens. It's just like, even imagine enslaved people, you know, in the South, like being able to revolt or to be able to imagine like running away. It's the kind of imaginative landscape that I think these artists often tap into in their own respective cultural backgrounds. So I really loved the opportunity to work with them. They were an amazing group. I think of all of them like heroes to me. They are doing amazing work in the field. I feel like when we think about what is possible for ceramics and grappling with different histories, both within like Western American context, but also just across the globe, these artists really, I think, set a precedent for me, at least thinking about my own practice and how we grapple with different symbols in history to kind of challenge that narrative. So I really enjoyed them. I strongly recommend you guys to look up each artist. I feel like every time I have a chance to see some of their work, it really just gives me a new perspective of stuff. And lastly, I want to touch on two new positions that I've just taken on. One, I'm a board member of Watershed for the Arts and Program Advisory Council, as well as I'm the new social media curator for NCCA. What I love about some of these platforms that I guess somebody my age might not foresee is just like being the young, new energy in the room and being able to take some of these past experiences, these past work environments, whether it's with Clay siblings or previously being a gallery assistant at the Clay studio, and tapping into that understanding of like exposure, accessibility, contact with artists, working with different professionals, and being able to implement that on a larger scale. So I'm really excited to be working with both organizations. We have some new initiatives come up that I can't wait to share with everyone, but I'm really excited, and I cannot express enough to people who are in the crowd who are my age. Just to clarify, I'm 24, but people who are my age, like if you get offered an opportunity like this, like definitely do research to make sure it's a safe opportunity, but it's such a great learning experience, and you never know what this could help you in the future. So I just want to, throw that out there, because I definitely had my doubts if I was ready enough, but I want to pass that on. So as I transition, it's really cool to be able to also share this side of me. Like I often wear a lot of hats where I facilitate a lot of different creative journeys, and I don't often get to talk about my actual practice. So I'm really excited to kind of touch on things related to this side of my brain. My artistic research is about descendants of strange fruit and like the current analysis of the current offspring that Nina Simone and Billie Holiday sing about. I often use this opportunity to dissect like American constructs of Black exceptionalism, womanhood, respectability, and those kind of ideas impact on the fruit's longevity, but also just how they're memorialized. Oftentimes these different, anti-Black environments have an impact of controlling the way these fruits are manifested, and later on how we continuously honor them. A lot of this work started when I was an undergrad, wanting to think about myself, but think about the ways clay has always been this material, very warm and connective to my body. It allowed me to think about myself, think about different external issues that I am always grappling with or thinking nuanced about. And so being able to articulate those things, but then still having a heavy research component with diagrams or reading books and things of that nature. So these are kind of a quick glimpse of what the fruit often look like. I started off when I was in undergrad making busts, and it was this way to depict, Black, any subject, but me personally, thinking about Black subjects and how to honor them. I really admired Greek statues, Greek monuments, and how oftentimes, you have this very poised, just proud individual or subject where you can see a balance between tragedy and pride and honor, grief. And I wanted to kind of tap into some of those elements. But one thing that I felt limited the conceptual effectability of my work is that a lot of that is related to the Eurocentric figurative language. And I was just how can I control the content, not in terms of how people are going to perceive it long-termly, but, if I'm thinking about truly trying to honor these Black subjects, whether it's their pitfalls or their high achievements, what is a way to really get to that core? And so I really love thinking about this idea of all these subjects, exist in this framework of strange fruit, but then also really get to tap into these odd contours, this idea that you have these undiscernible features that are hard to appreciate sometimes, or hard to understand or grapple with. And so I started, as these questions became more abstract, I felt like the visual language I had to use for implementing also had to be more abstract. So here's a few more. A lot of times the fruits are, well, not a lot of times, all the fruits are pinched and hollow. It's a very important key factor for me. I think that the fruit should look just as abstract and obscure and constructed on the outside, it should be reflected on the inside. And I feel like when you're pinching, you're mirroring that kind of energy. And so one thing that I really also wanted to do was like think about this intimate space of building, you know, like when you're coiling or you're pinching, you're like taking your time, you're meditating. I got a chance to do a workshop at Penland a couple summers ago with Paul Briggs on meditative pinching. He also like was a huge fan of Paul's Berenson. So like this intimate space, that you embody when you're working with the clay, you're holding and pinching it and drying it and flipping it and moving it. It's also very like conceptually key to like how I care for these fruits when I'm creating them. So in addition to when I'm making the fruit, I'm often thinking about how do they exist in the environment they're in? What is, how, like when you hold them, when you touch them, when you see them, what kind of other contextual information are you being fed? And just to go back for a quick second, like, oh, that doesn't go back. A lot of these fruits, you know, exist within this framework of a sacred object. So, you know, tactility allows like this transfer of energy from the fruit to the audience member and then back to the fruit. So like if that is like a key factor for myself, I felt like I could take that up a notch when I'm creating an installation. So on the left was one giant room, just two aspects of the installation. On the left was, it's called the table where anti-Blackness is consumed, and it's 5 different strange fruit offerings. And so, you know, think of it like a Thanksgiving style buffet. You know, people gather and they sit down, and it's this opportunity, like you see like how dirty or dingy the tablecloth looks. This is room covered in dirt. It's this very eerie, disgusting, gross plates that you sit in front of, being expected to feast off of these different food dishes. And so in this environment, you see the fruit being preyed upon, see the fruit actually being stagnant in this perceived way, this stagnant space. And then on the right side, you have this water reservoir where it's almost like a different healing energy. You have destruction on the left, and then like this opportunity for healing, or they're both community driven, but like this opportunity for like not only the fruit to heal, but the participant, the person that's in the space. So what does that kind of agency look like when you're able to be a part of this healing process? And so for me, what I really enjoyed about kind of creating this variety of fruit was an opportunity to see fruit come to life, both in depicting the destruction or the inherent violence created in the, you know, the toxic environment it exists in, but also like, could there be a new interpretation of the healing environment the fruit can be or can create for itself? So here's like another close up from, and also to explain from like left to right, the fruit read sex workers, Black elites, exceptional Black, working class, and prisoners. And so it's like these different categorizations of quote unquote good versus bad Blacks, or this idea of who is being devoured and what is being devoured. As I mentioned earlier, like I'm very research driven, so I ask a lot of questions. Questions are just as important to me as touching the clay itself. Sometimes I'm asking 2 questions to actually get to the question I really want. And so on the left is the first set of questions I created for Strange Fruit, which is, you know, kind of a synthesis of different Black texts, you know, by Maya Angelou, Langston Hughes, who have all thought about strange fruit or this obscurity of life within this vivid landscape of a country, and thinking about what does it look like to just really reach your full manifestation or your full potential. And so I'm going through all these questions, asking about saggy, droopy loads, undiscernible features. But the thing that I feel like is most essential about these list of questions is the last one, which is, what does our harvest look like? And so for me, these questions kind of act like as a bone in front of a dog on a treadmill. Like I'm constantly running this thing that I'm chasing and unpacking and asking more questions about. As I started to unpack these questions, I started to create diagrams that further try to answer or get to the root of some things I'm thinking about. So on the right is like how I envision kind of the strange fruit lifespan, or at least at the time, what I visualized as the strange fruit lifespan. And so it hanging from the tree, then falling to the ground and begin to rot. The seeds are released into the ground and they start germinating. And then from there, imagine what is the possibility for those seeds. But what I really love about this song is that it's often misunderstood that what the lyrics are is like the entire description of what is possible for strange fruit. And my work is, I'm able to read between the lines or think between the gaps, and just imagine beyond the possibility of, or imagine what the words might have been saying beyond what the time frame that they were created in were able to explain. And so, that brings me to some of my more recent diagrams, where on the left, it's just like, what if the fruit could have agency, right? And it can determine its own life and have, exist beyond this kind of systemic, this equals this and does this and does this. So I was just like, well, what if the fruit was hanging from the tree and instead of dropping to the ground, it dropped in a river and was taken somewhere else? And then immediately you can imagine a different set of possibilities for that fruit. Or what if the seeds were picked up by a bird and transferred to some other location? Like what is possible for self-definition, self-determination for this fruit? And so as I began to unpack agency and self-determination, a lot of times what is often misconstrued is that like a lot of these things had to be dealt with in silos. And it's often a missed opportunity to think about intersectionality between identities. So like if you're Black and you're gay, or if you're Black and you're a woman, or low, poor, and this, what are the intersection identities that kind of complicate further this lifespan of a strange fruit? And so my first attempt at that is starting to think through my own womanhood and thinking about the complexities of that, which I started to explore in the diagram to the right, how some of these controlling images or perceptions of characteristics of Black women control how that version of a strange fruit is dissected or able to live or be memorialized. And so oftentimes, like a lot of this layered research work lives, in like diagrams on my wall in my studio or in my sketchbook, or like little notes that I write everywhere. But what I wanted to do even further than that was like, how can I bring them out and make them objects themselves? And so that started to lead into creating these larger signs through screen printing and painting, taking excerpts from my notebook and being able to make them a billboard, so to speak, to capture what I'm saying. And even implementing, kind of text details like underlining or scratch outs and that kind of nature. But what I started to see was like, these weren't just paintings, these are sculptures as well. So how can I continuously think critically about the object itself and the context it is in? And so that started to think about like, is the writing meant to be read? If it is meant to be read, how can that be dissected? How can that be an opportunity for the audience to engage in? And so the one on the left is actually my first opportunity to take a stab at that. It's actually the last sentence of those strange fruit questions. It says, what does our harvest look like? And I just really wanted to tap into this opportunity of like, make people work for the content. And it's just like, that middle space between like, is it too hard for you to read? But just hard enough where you want to like it's in reach where you want to read it. So you're like moving and trying to work through it. And I think that's a very important concept, because it's not just about the content that you're digesting. It's about what are you doing to get to the content that is equally as important to me. So another really big leap in this direction was being able to create or recreate the strange fruit questions. This was like a test run of it. I ended up doing a better version of this. Actually, probably should have included that picture for it. But this one, it was the test run where it's black lettering on this black paper. And so like on the left, you can kind of see, like, if you were further back, it would just look like just a black sheet of paper, very ordinary. But as you get up close to it, the light starts bending and you can kind of see the reflections and you're like, wait, there's something there. And it's just like that little frame, that little time frame where you can get somebody's attention to make them start doing something, or start bending their body and doing odd things. And I feel like, to me, that is what I aim for in sculpture, not only in the strange fruit when capturing these like odd contours, but just like how people engage with the narratives. And so it becomes like not only a conceptual mental activity, but it also is like physical. Like your body has to be moving in some kind of way to be activated by the work. I've recently been kind of transferring some of those objects from those larger signs into diagrams. And so sticking with the same platform of being able to have people kind of engage with, on a tactile level, of flipping between the imagery of a person with a blurred face to like intimate writings and conversations. And so I'm like highlighting, scratching out stuff. I'm drawing arrows, different things. And I feel like, to me, it's always, this work is still pretty fresh. So I'm still like trying to understand the key elements. But what I often love is just like that watching people flip back and forth. There's like a mental check-in, like, okay, I saw that, but like, what is this? And then like, I think that is also a really small way of like the previous image where I'm getting people to move their body, like their mind and their body are working together to try to unravel a thing. And even if you don't, like, to me, don't understand or don't get to it, or I ask a question that has no answer, it's like, maybe the objective was to just do the thing, And I think that for me, ceramics has been a vehicle with that, like maybe not even understanding the significance of why I made this cup or why I made this bug, but the act of making the object itself is like enough, or is the objective there. So I've kind of tapped into that a little bit when making some of these diagrams, and even been able to take this intimate thing that I do in my sketchbook or in these signs and pull them out and make them just as important as the fruits themselves. So lastly, I want to like share, some things that I've been doing. Since COVID, I've been able to start my own studio in my basement. I've been working on these kind of little tiny strange fruits that are more of like kind of hand charms, so to speak. Think of them like prayer beads or something, like where you hold them in your hand or you fidget, or something that is intimately transferred between you and the object. And so I've been making some of them with these abstract geometric lines and cuts. I really love the kind of combination of between the two, the contrast between the two. Started working on these at Haystack last summer and been having just fun. Like, I think that's been something new for me lately. It's just having fun and doing some new stuff that I haven't really tried before. So here's a few more, but yeah, that's it. Thank you guys. Any questions?
Thank you so much for your presentation. Feel free, if anyone has questions, please post them in the chat. I do have a question to start off with. So you mentioned that a lot of times young people don't feel like they have the power to step forward and like get involved in things. Do you have any advice or suggestions for people on how they can get involved in organizations like you have?
Yeah, one thing that I will say as of right now, like, use social media to your advantage. Like, I think that especially within like the ceramics world, I feel like there's a lot more warmth or like, even if you just comment under somebody's picture, or like say they posted something on their story that you really enjoyed or something like that, it just like being genuine and being very honest and being like, yo, I really love this content, or like, yo, can you tell me a little bit more about this? I really would love to get involved. And just doing that warm introduction, like sometimes that could be the scariest thing ever, just putting yourself in that circumstance to be like, this person's gonna think I'm mad weird. But I think that can lead to a very honest relationship with the person that you might be working with. And I think that's honestly, to me, I said honest so many times, but that's the most, honesty is the most important characteristic, I think, in a lot of these situations, that people want to know that not only that you care about the things that you say you care about, but also like you're somebody you can trust, that they can trust. And so use social media to your advantage. I think there's a lot of organizations that are looking for new voices to really push back and give them new content, new feedback, because there's a lot of things that are changing in the world, and young people, especially millennials, are at the head of that wave. And so a lot of these organizations are being hip to like, if we want to stay relevant, if we want to stay powerful, and we want to actually do meaningful work, we have to include more younger voices. So definitely reach out to people you genuinely feel like you connect with, or connect with some of their missions or initiatives, and just say like, how can I get involved? Or like stay in touch with them if they don't have nothing coming up. I think that opens up a door for things later on down the line that you won't even expect. Oh, sorry. What did you say?
Oh, I was just going to say that's great to hear, because so many people, I feel like, even like just out of undergrad, are like not sure what to do or how to get involved in certain things.
Definitely. And I feel like, especially with the Clay Summons project, like it wasn't even like, we weren't like the way it is now. We had no idea. We just were two young crazy people just wanting to do something that we felt passionate about. We just like, this is something we really like, and let's just try it out. And I owe a lot of that to my professor, Peter Biesicker, who just kind of put the bug in our ear and was like, y'all should just do it if y'all want to do it. So I think that having also people like that to bounce ideas off of has been very helpful, in a way that just kind of gives us has given me, Mike and I, the courage to just like move forward on an idea that we might not have like initially would have went for.
Yeah, sometimes you just need that push.
Very true.
Did you guys start that during undergrad or afterwards?
We started that in our junior year, so the spring of 2017. Yeah, 2017. Yeah, we started working on it in January. We came back from from winter break, and then we did it for the first time in Portland in 2017. So we did it that year, and then we decided in Pittsburgh we were just gonna make it bigger, and we were gonna include more people, more schools that didn't have clay or didn't have wheels and stuff. So it just became like a snowball effect. And one thing that Mike and I always, that keeps us on our toes about the project, keeps us honest, is just like, we got to make sure we're having fun. We got to make sure that we're doing it because we want to do it. And that every year we know that, it's no secret. Every year we give ourselves the opportunity to walk away from it. So every year we do an evaluation, like, okay, what worked, what didn't work? Do you still want to do it? And just being honest about that, I think, is also what keeps the project fresh and loving, because it's every bit of it we want to do. I think somebody has a question, Colleen. What texts or writers are you reading now that inform your work? Ooh, good question. I love books, so Colleen, you just kind of made me feel real special. I think what I have right here is probably like sufficient. And then I have a few more books, but I can probably reference them without moving. The book that I really love right now that's been really feeding me is Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Maree Brown, who's an incredible writer. I strongly recommend this for everybody to read. It's a book that really taps into a lot of ideas about how to think critically about what feels good to us naturally, and how we're often judged, or not judged, we're often taught or trained to misjudge that or not trust that. And so, especially as someone who identifies as a woman, you know, what things about my body, about my mind, about who I am just naturally have been taught to mistrust. And really kind of like unthinking that and really unpacking those ideas, I feel like have been very, very core to my work lately. I've been drawing like new diagrams about pleasure and about mistrust and coolness. I should have kept some diagrams. I cleaned up today, so I put everything away. But I really love this book because it's been just opening my mind about what feels good to me. And that's been subsequently asking other questions. Two other books that I would give recommendations, and I can type this in the chat at the end to make sure everybody has the names. The second one would be Art on My Mind by Bell Hooks. It's probably one of my all-time favorite books ever. It really put me into a critical thinking space. And I'm sorry, I'm like blinking, but it put me into a really critical thinking space that I hadn't really been in prior to. I actually had just started the Descendants of Strange Fruit idea. And then later on, that like I started maybe the idea in like March. And then like maybe that summer I came across the book, and it just transformed how I thought about the project overall. And so the advice or analogy I would create for it is, think about learning how to box. I feel like you get punched a lot in the face. Like, I feel like that's what the book is about, is like constantly being troubled with what you might have learned in the past has been wrong. And so I think about, you know, learning how to box. You get punched in the face a lot, but then you learn how to dodge punches. You learn how to think critically. You learn how to move your feet and stuff. And the whole time, Bell Hooks is in your ear in the ring telling you how to dodge them. So that's how I would describe that book. And the last book is Sovereignty of the Quiet by Kevin Quashie. I love this book. I know I said I love books, and I've been saying I love all these books, but this is a book I really, really, really want people to read. It's an incredible, incredible book that talks about kind of interiority and thinking about who you are in your own sacred space, in your mind, in your body. Similar to pleasure activism, like who are you naturally and what do you gravitate to? And just kind of how sometimes we shapeshift into a more public expressive identity that has nothing to do with that core interiority. And that is performative. And so I really love that because Kevin talks about those ideas in relationship to Blackness and how a lot of things that we take on in terms of our identity become very performative because of, you know, the rewards that come from public admiration for doing those kind of things. So I would totally recommend that book too. But yeah, those are three, and I'll write them in the chat too. Somebody had a question. What artists are you admiring right now outside of the artists mentioned in your presentation? Ooh, these are good questions. That's a good question. Who am I thinking about lately? I'll come back to it, but I think off the cuff, who I really love right now is, or who I've always loved, is Glenn Ligon and Lorna Simpson. They're not clay artists, but they're two artists that I really love who think about the ways we understand space and dimensionality, like between like a 2D object and the body, or like something that's occupying space, like maybe like one of those 3-panel boards. Like, it's just like, how can those objects activate the body and the mind at the same time, which are very similar to my practice that I talked about earlier. I feel like in terms of clay people, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank, but I will also, thank you, Kristen, I will write those names in the chat as I think about them. Yeah.
I have one other question. So with COVID happening, how has that impacted or changed how your involvement is in the different organizations you're a part of?
Lots of Zoom calls. And like in Philadelphia, I'm in this art collective that you mentioned, Vox Populi. I started that in last summer in August. So it was about 6 months of working with them in person and like 6 months of like computer stuff. And so one thing that's felt like a new thing we had to implement because it was just way too many computer interactions is like, you know, some safe social distant meetings like have been a good balance to help, you know, get the juices flowing for new ideas that we want to do, but also like just make sure we are healthy. I think for the most part, a lot of my work with Watershed was already pretty virtual because of the nature of like everybody being remote. But because NCECA, I just recently started working with NCECA, it's been kind of interesting working on initiatives that I'm so used to doing with a person like, you know, right next to me, grappling with ideas have been a little bit interesting, like getting to know somebody or those kind of workflow antics. But overall, things have been moving semi-steady. I wasn't actually working for quite a bit of the pandemic. I was unemployed for quite a bit, but I think that actually gave me more of an opportunity to actually shift my practice shift my mindset into my practice. So I've actually probably made more work than I've made in like the 2 years I've been out of undergrad, just because I've had more time to be critical of myself and say like, okay, what do you really want to think about versus just like producing something under like a certain deadline or something like that. So I feel like there's been a lot of overwhelming challenges, of course, with COVID, but I think one of the most impactful ones that I'm honestly thankful for is just being able to like position myself to have more attention on my practice. And I'm gonna write these names in the chat too before I forget, because I know it's almost time. But anybody, please feel free to ask questions. It's so good to see so many people here. Like, hey Daniel, so good to see you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. Gerald, you gave a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
No problem. You guys can feel free to follow me on Instagram. Like if this was like a little bit overwhelming, you can always shoot me a DM or a question, or like even my email is open as well.
While Gerald's typing all of your information in and answers to your questions, I just want to remind you guys that we do have an open house coming up at the end of September on Saturday, September 26th. It's going to be free and a virtual programming. So check out our website, touchstonecrafts.org. We'll have more information about that on there later. And then we are planning to have another artist talk in a couple weeks. So stay tuned for that as well.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Stacy. I'm so excited we got a chance to do this. I feel like artists often like really just need places to just like come together and listen, especially to people who are at different stages in their career. So thank you so much for hosting this and inviting me. I look forward to joining more artist talks and just kind of connecting with people.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. This has been wonderful.
Awesome. Well, definitely. If you guys don't have any more questions, feel free. I don't know how long this will be open, but I can just write my email down here one more time, and then people can feel free to message me. Oh yeah, and your IG. Thanks, Colleen.